I'm going to show you guys how I like to run wires to the firewall. Um, the way the wires were run in this one by the previous vehicle owner, they had punctured the boot, and I'm going to have to try to figure out a way to seal that up because you could have water ingress down into the wiring harness, and that's not a good thing. And that water will then run down those wires, and they will end up running directly into this control module right here, because that grommet is right above it and those harnesses run directly to that. So you're basically funneling water into that control module at that point in time, if it ever makes it in there. And water, unfortunately, is one of those things that if there's a will, there's a way. It'll find a way into it. So you have to be very, very careful about how you're sealing things. A lot of times before you run a wire or a harness through a grommet, or say you're going to punch a hole through the boot like that, you want to put what they call like a service loop or a service dip, because what'll happen is as it goes down like this, the water will naturally run downhill and it will stay there. It can't run back uphill. So if you put a loop into your harness, it'll keep the water from running down into that hole. And I'm going to show you how I typically do it. You can unwrap that, expand that boot, and then run your wires through that firewall grommet in that boot. Once everything's laid how you want it, then you come back in here and then you rewrap this with electrical tape, closing that boot off and basically making a watertight seal at that point in time. So this one's not wanting to play very nice as far as unraveling. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a very sharp utility blade and I'm just going to score the tape. I don't want to shove it in to the point where I'm going to be cutting into the rubber, but I just want to sit here and slowly drag it across that tape and score it, so that way I can tear it. Okay, so with all the tape and the shielding off, you can see that we are down to the rubber boot here. And pull this back, you can kind of see that. So at this point, this is where you would pick up on this, give yourself a gap, and then you would run your wiring harness through that. You can use a fish tape to do it. Just be very, very careful that you don't puncture this boot or tear the boot on the other side as well. There's another boot that looks almost identical to this on the inside that may require the same thing, where you take the tape off around the harness, and that's just something that you have to kind of look at on your specific application. From what I can tell on this particular vehicle, it's not taped again on the inside. It looks like the harness just runs straight through that grommet. So we should be on luck on this one. Should just be a matter of running the cables through now. But before we can do that, we need to assemble the harness. Now, when assembling your harness, you need to consider a couple of different variables. One, you need to consider how many wires you're going to be running back and forth. That's not just wires coming in. You may need to be running wires back out at the same time. So you need to consider all of that stuff. The other thing you need to take into consideration is where the cable is being routed through, and making sure that you have enough room for service loops. So in the future, if you have a problem with the cable and say you need to remove the component to get to the cable to test it, you have enough slack in the cable to do that. Also, you want to leave yourself enough room that if the end of the cable is bad, say the terminal fails or the connector gets crushed or whatever the circumstances could be, that you have enough cable left in there that you can make a repair, whether that's cutting it shorter, splicing another cable into the end of it, whatever way that ends up going. You just need to think ahead on all those aspects. This harness right here is going to plug into the back of the Goal Zero, into the link module. And this harness came from Freedom Van Gogh down in Florida. They specialize in sprinter builds, and this is one of the cables that they specialize in, or that they build. This would be your alternator charging cable. So what they do is they build a 25-foot or 30-foot cable. That's a universal cable that runs between the battery and the Goal Zero. And you can put this into any type of truck or van. And we're going to run this most likely up through the headliner here. And it's going to come down right here through the B-pillar into the back panel. And then up along the side of the box right here. And it's going to plug into the back of the Goal Zero on the back side. What we're also going to run at the exact same time is that 8-gauge wire that I removed. I'm going to repurpose that, and I'm going to run it into this exact same sleeve here. So it makes the exact same run. It's going to come again down through here, back up, and then it's going to plug into this port right here, which is a 50-volt input port, and that is where our solar charge is going to go into. So this thing has got a built-in solar charge regulator, and that is going to take all that current from our solar panel, which for that, right now the plan is we're going to use this 85 watt solar panel that actually has adhesive on the back side of it. And we got this from 4D Solar. So the plan is to put that on the hood, and then that Anderson connector terminal is actually going to plug into the end of this, which is an Anderson connector. So hopefully this will all come together. We're going to come down the headliner all the way down the A pillar right here. And then we're actually going to go through this hole in the dash right here where the factory harness is. And that'll bring us right out to grommet on this side. And then once we're in this side, we need to make sure that these ends here are going to reach to where the solar panel is going to terminate, and that this cable here is going to reach all the way across the firewall to that battery. So that's going to connect the Goal Zero to the vehicle battery, and that's also going to be the solar panel run back to the Goal Zero. The other wire that I need to take into consideration here is that we are going to be running some 12 volt accessories off of the battery that are going to require power, and I need to do a cable run from that into the truck as well. And the output power coming from the Goal Zero, we're going to have one going to the fridge, but on top of that we're also going to have one coming off that's a 30 amp power that's going to run the same way, but it's going to drop in right here, come down the B pillar, and it's going to run over to the center console here, and that's going to power that. And then from that center console we need to run a power out that's going to go underneath the dash and come back out here. It's probably going to mount either to the top of this box here or in front of it somewhere, but that is going to be where our Garmin switch pod is going to be, or our power switch I should say. So that's going to control our exterior lights, and that's going to be powered solely off of the Goal Zero. So that way when we're in camp, we can turn our lights on the exterior of the truck and not have to worry about diminishing or killing our starter battery. It'll all be off the Goal Zero at that point. So that's what I mean by taking into consideration your runs, your lengths of your cable, and what you're going to be running. It's very important at this stage to slow things down and really think about what you need in there. So I mean, draw a diagram out, do whatever you need to do, list your components that you know that you're going to be putting in the truck and possible future components. Anything that's going to have to go through that firewall grommet, you want to make sure that you pull this time. And if anything, pull an extra 1 or 2 wires through there just to make sure that you're future-proof. All right, I have my sheathing on my cables right now. Obviously, these are not cut to length. They're long on purpose. And we've got my line fishing tool. See right down here. Pulled through. I'll show you guys that a little bit more about that here in just a minute. You can use fish tape or a coat hanger or whatever. Just make sure that you protect the end so it doesn't pierce any of the wires. This tool actually has kind of like a Chinese finger trap on the end of it to grab onto a wire. Just using masking tape. And normally I'd use electrical tape, but I just ran out of electrical tape, wouldn't you know it? And then I'm going to attach this into here. All right, so this is the tool that I use to pull this in. This is actually sold by Matco Tools. I'm sure you can find it at other suppliers, but it's different lengths that can screw together. And it's basically just a coiled wire. You can see where the sheath is actually torn on this one. And it's got a little tip on the end of it to help guide it through tight spots like that. And then again, the end is threaded, so you can extend this thing as long as you want. And then you slide your wire into that, and then the harder you pull, the more it grips. I usually wrap some tape around it for extra protection. to make sure that's not going to come out. And then the other thing I do is, once I have the tape and that on it, I'll hit this rod and the end of the cable with a little bit of WD-40 to help it slide through the grommet. So there you can see we're pulling it through right now. Just like that. So we'll probably work from this end forward so that way I know how much slack I need. So now we've got our cabling run through the ceiling here, through the headliner. It's running all the way down. And it's coming in through where the A-pillar is going to sit there, down underneath the dash, and I have it zip tied to the factory harness. It's going out through the grommet underneath the hood. And then I'll also have the other wire, which will be coming from our Goal Zero. Once I run that cabling to the center console, we'll be able to run out to the power switch underneath the hood to control our exterior accessories. So this harness is already sheathed, so I'm going to pull that back in, and then that's going to run underneath the dash here and over to the electronics tray on the center console. Okay, so now that we got that cable pulled through, this is going to secure up underneath the dash, run underneath all this. It's going to run behind this support right here and over to the electronics tray, much like that, just like I said on the back side of that. And that'll bring 12-volt power from the vehicle battery into the electronics tray, as well as give me a spot to run power from the Goal Zero in the back out to underneath the hood to our power switch. We're going to run this 14x4 cable back through the grommet, and this is going to be for our activations off of that power switch. All right, just like that, we got them through. So this was the 14x4 cable that we just pulled through. This is the power and grounds that we pulled that are coming from the fuse box to the Garmin power switch. And then this guy right here is the wire for the seat heater circuit. All the accessories on this truck are actually hardwired to the vehicle battery because it was a law enforcement vehicle. So they did a modification to make all those ports have power on at all times. So it's very difficult to find a 15 circuit power supply, which is a key on power supply. So we're just going to tap back into where it was before, but we're going to clean the harness up a lot better. Here is, I built this electronics tray out of some plastic that I had.